but I'll take you through the pitch I give. And this pitch was given to South American microbrewers who are trying to break through the noise of all the industrial brewers and get craft beer going in South America. And my point basically is, yes, you have to have a great product. That's mandatory. Don't go to market with not a great product. But having a great product is totally insufficient. There's so much more you need to break through the noise and be successful. And that's true in a product or individually trying to sell yourself. So anyway, we started Pete's Brewing Company in 1986, so many, many moons ago. And we weren't the first craft brewer, but we were early. Maybe there were 24 craft brewers in the US. So we got in early, but our whole point was to do it differently and really try to break through, obviously having a great beer, but also more to it and different approaches on how we went to market.
Tell me the story about how you came up with the name Beyond Pete.
Okay. There's a slide I'm showing Barry now that the title is 1985 Thought Process for the Brand. And when we started our company, I was working in Silicon Valley for a telecommunications company. And a friend of mine who worked with me but went on to a venture capital firm started bugging me around 1984. Let's start a company, let's start a company, let's start a company. And I actually liked my job. I didn't want to leave it. And finally in 1985, I called him up and I said, look, we have nothing to lose by talking, but I don't want to talk about the product. Let's talk about the company. What are the goals of the company? And if it makes sense that we agree on what we want the company to do, then we can always determine what our product's going to be. But we did not go out and say we're going to make a great micro beer and sell it. That was the furthest thing from our mind. So what did we do? We met at a delicatessen in Mountain View. I worked in Sunnyvale, Santa Clara. He worked in Mountain View. So the halfway point was Mountain View. So we went to the Jew and the Gentile deli. And it was great to have a Jew and a Gentile meet at the Jew and the Gentile. And we sat down and over lunch, several lunches, we came up with an outline of what we thought the goals of the company would be. The first was we had to make an award-winning product. And we still hadn't talked about beer. We just said the product, whatever product we did, had to be gold medal winning, world-class, top shelf, whatever you want to call it. The second was we wanted to get in the ground floor of a new industry, not to get into a crowded industry. It's easier to show what you can do when it's a new industry, you're one of the early players, and you can kind of write your own ticket on how you're going to do it. And third was to treat the product with reverence. You have to have a great product, but everything else with irreverence. So we got those three, and I thought, holy crap, if we can achieve all three of these, let's take the next step. So we sat down and we said, okay, what's this ground floor opportunity? And we did some research. And, well, I shouldn't say that. When we sat down to talk about what product we would make, I had just won some medals at a state home brewing competition. And my partner, his name is Mark, has never had any alcohol, ever. So he was curious what a beer competition was like, and I explained to him. And this is one part of the presentation I really want to reinforce is, Dan, you got to be smart in what you do. You got to be smart. You got to be smart. On the other hand, it pays to be lucky. Thank God I had won these home brewing medals, because we never would have talked about beer unless Mark asked me, so tell me about a beer competition. I told him what the beer competition was like. Then he said, aren't there some small breweries like Anchor Steam or Sierra Nevada? So I told him that, and then he wanted to know about craft beer versus industrial beer, so I explained that to him. And then we thought, maybe this is our ground floor opportunity, because while the monopoly brewers dominate the market, Bud Miller and Coors have 80% of the market, this whole little segment of craft beer is completely different than what they're doing. It's tiny, so maybe we can get in. So that led to more questions. We never went too far without asking a lot of basic questions. So we said, okay, we're going to have to make a gold medal winning beer. It's easy to say, but obviously you got to work hard and come up with a great beer. Secondly, we wanted to personalize the brand. We liked what Ben & Jerry did for ice cream. In Palo Alto, Debbie Field in the 1980s started Mrs. Field's Cookies. People got behind her. She was a real person. So we said we'd personalize our company, and it would be Mark and Pete's or Pete and Mark's. And at the last minute, Mark said, I don't drink, so Pete, you're the brewer. Why don't we call it Pete's? Okay, so we had a company name, and we had an idea of what we were going to do. But we also had to ask ourselves, very important question, and you got to ask this in whatever you do, who's your customer? And most people will say, stupid question. My customer is the person who buys the beer at the bar or at the store. And the answer is no, that's not your customer. It's one of your customers. So we had to think through, and in the beginning, we didn't really think it through completely because we didn't know the beer business, but we had to ask ourselves, why would a beer wholesaler who's making millions of dollars off of Bud Miller and Coors, why would they want to bring our brand into their business? We're small, there's not much margin in it. Why would they want to carry us? And more importantly, why would a sales guy for the wholesaler who depends on commissions, if he has a couple minutes with a buyer, why would he spend the whole time explaining Pete's Wicked Ale and maybe get the commission on one case where he can sell a pallet of Miller Lite? Sure. How do you get the beer salesman to want to represent you versus 50 other companies they represent? So we had to come up with a strategy. And what we wanted to do as a differentiator, and you'll hear differentiation, differentiation, differentiation all the time. We wanted to say, we need to have people do a double take. You know, imagine you're going down a grocery store aisle, whatever, whether it's cereal or beer or chocolate, you name it. Why would a customer see you? Forget asking why they would buy your product. Why would they even see you? So our strategy from the very beginning was we had to make people do a double take. Double take meaning if you're walking down an aisle, your eyes have to go to something on the shelf and make you stop and take another look. If people don't see you, they'll never pick it up. If they never pick it up, they'll never buy you. So the core part of the core strategy was make people do a double take. Secondly, along those lines, a lot of brewers were making great beers back then, but we said, let's take it to the next level and have humor as a core value. I mean, that was one of our one of the three core values of the company in the beginning, but really leverage humor as a differentiator. Make people smile when they see you. And every time we can, do things differently. Don't follow everybody's path. If everybody goes right, you go left. So we had to think through how can we do things differently and get some attention. The next picture I'm showing Barry is our first display, our case display in 1986. And this was in a place called Liquor Barn in Mountain View. And I put this slide up for a variety of reasons. First, it was very thrilling to actually see your product in a store. Absolutely. Secondly, our original label, and we had no money. We started this company, if you can believe this, granted it was 1986, but we started the company with $20,000. We got product on the shelf for $20,000. So you got to think about how you're going to start your company. You know, if you're going to start a company, how you go about doing it, and thinking through how you can do it on the cheap and still be effective. But getting back to making people do a double take, we had no money for a real artist. Mm-hmm. But conceptually, I had an English Bull Terrier. Ultimately, Anheuser-Busch had Spuds MacKenzie, but we were first. We had a lot of legal problems with them, but they acknowledged that we were first. But a Bull Terrier is a very funny-looking dog. I thought it was a great-looking dog. Mark thought it was stupid-looking, but we both agreed nobody puts a funny-looking dog on a beer label. It's going to make people stop and look. But
it goes back to one of the core concepts,
right.
You were saying, which you decided ahead of time.
Right. And not only is it a white dog, but it's a white dog on a purple label, and the purple label goes on a brown bottle. You can see this label from 20 feet away. And the picture I have is a bunch of the beers that were available in 1986 on the shelf behind this. And it's a clear indication that your eyes go here, not to anybody else.
Absolutely.
So if you're not seen, you're not picked up.
Sure.
So that, and you combine that with the name Wicked, nobody had a weird sense of humor back then. So by putting Wicked on the label, that was our secondary hook. And over time, I'd ask people, why'd you ever try Pete's Wicked Ale for the first time? And literally 99 out of 100 people said with the name Wicked, they had to try it at least. So then you have to, of course, follow up with a gold medal winning product. But the gold medal winning product doesn't matter unless people
Pick it up and buy it.
right.
Sure. Drink it.
So the next picture I'm showing is, I'll throw a term out at you guys. There's something called a sell sheet. A sell sheet is when you have a commercial product and you want to communicate a lot of the values of that product on a one-pager. You have to simplify. Sell sheets are a great way to show wholesalers who you are, why you are, and retailers, and ultimately consumers. But the second product we launched was called Pete's Wicked Lager. So to launch it, everybody else would say, we have a new product. It's called Pete's Wicked Lager. And we said, that's too ho-hum. Why would anybody care? So we put, the scene is on the slide. It's a doctor in a delivery room with gloves on. And he's holding a pint of Pete's Wicked Lager. And the tagline, there are two taglines, is, congratulations, it's a lager. Instead of saying, we have a new product, congratulations, lager. And the ultimate tagline is, born wicked. That, we had standing ovations from every wholesaler we introduced the product to. They said, this is great. This shows that you're for real and you have, you're thinking through what you got to do.
It also speaks back, Pete, to you said about differentiate and add humor and do all those things that are differentiating points as opposed to here we are. You're hoping you actually kind of walk the talk of your initial mindset when you all set out to develop a plan of attack, right? So you're kind of following what you had pre-written earlier.
Exactly. Yeah, but you have to follow through. If you believe it, you got to follow through.
That's a very strong point.
And the follow through on this was typically a beer company will hand out free T-shirts.
Right.
At the point where you're giving the presentation, we said, the heck with that, let's do it differently. So we made customized doctor's smocks, the green doctor's smocks, with Born Wicked on one side and Pete's Wicked Lager on the other side. And again, the wholesalers would just jump up and down and said, this is it. And we sold, I don't know, I'll make up a number, $500,000 worth of these shirts just because it was so different. This is a view, if you sell your beer in grocery stores and you're on a shelf with 200 other beers, why would people care? So we decided that it's going to cost us some money, but the best way to be seen in a grocery store is to get an end display. So how do you convince a grocery store that you should be the end display? Well, you have to say, we're going to put some material out there to make people aware of it and buy it. So we decided to do, I didn't decide, our marketing agency, we had some smart people in the company and outside the company. But in personalizing it, they created these 6-foot-high cardboard cutouts of me in various scenes. This one is for the Olympics in '96. It was a let us game us begin us, tied in with the Atlanta Olympics. They had me in a muscle man's body. But when people would walk down the grocery store aisles, they see this display, their eyes would go to it, and they have to pick it up and see what it is. And we sold a lot of beer that way.
At what point did you add a marketing agency? Because you're about 10 or 12 years ahead now of the original conversations.
Well, this is from 1996. We started in '86. So this particular thing was in our 10th year, but we started using agencies before that when we had enough money.
Right.
We try to be as creative on the cheap as far as we can, but at some point you gotta.
Right, but you didn't start with I just want everybody to understand. You didn't start with a marketing agency.
No,
we started with your own game plan, humor,
and
differentiation,
and only 20 grand.
Right. Okay, good.
People say, what about advertising? And it turns out for small companies, advertising is the worst thing you can do because small companies don't have your product in distribution.
Right.
You don't want to advertise and then have people go to stores and say, I want to get it, and they don't carry it, so there's no benefit. But for small companies, public relations is a killer app.
Okay.
If you can get newspapers to put stuff on you for free in the newspapers or magazines, that's great. So the picture I'm showing now, it's a strange picture, Barry, isn't it? It's me in a bathtub with bottles of beer all over me. I'm basically naked with just boots on and a hat, holding up bottles of our beer. We wanted to get the newspapers to print that we finally got to 1 million cases. When we shipped our 1,000,000th case, we wanted to get people to cover it. And we also knew, why would anybody care? Newspapers could care about a little company. 1 million cases in the scheme of things isn't a lot. Who cares? So we had a young woman we hired a year out of University of Colorado, very creative marketing lady. She said, when I think of beer, homebrew, I think of brewing beer in a bathtub. So Pete, would you get in the bathtub? We'll do this scene and we'll attach this picture to the press release. So we weren't confident at all that we could ever get anybody to carry an article that we got to 1 million cases.
Right.
With this picture attached to the article, we got into 300 newspapers. So it was the cost of a photo shoot and printing the press release, and we got into 300 newspapers. You can't buy that.
No.
Another strategy that we had at the beginning, so I'm kind of going back, Mark and I talked about so many things in the beginning, and when we talked about why would a wholesaler care when we're one of 200 suppliers, and why would a wholesaler salesperson care? We knew that if we wanted to become national, and that was our goal, the only way we can protect ourselves outside of our home market, the only way to control your destiny is you have to have your own feet on the street in whatever state or metropolitan area you are. So we decided, instead of building our own brewery and putting millions of dollars into the plant, our strategy would be, I would do the formulas and we go to existing breweries that had excess capacity.
Sure.
It would be beneficial for them to have us utilize that capacity, and of course it allowed us to make beer without investing in the plant and equipment. But rather than not spending, instead of keeping the money that we didn't spend on the brewery itself, we said let's invest in the direct sales force. By having our own feet on the street, they would get to know the local salespeople.
Sure.
And build relationships. And it's all a mind share game. If, for example, if there are 100 products in the portfolio and you're one of the 100, why would the salesperson give you more than 1% of the time?
Right.
That's just straight math.
Sure.
But based on relationships, you can get maybe 3% or 4%. So by focusing on award-winning beer, focusing on having our own salespeople in the market, and then good marketing support. The picture I'm showing Barry now is Inc. magazine. They rate the top 500 fastest growing private companies, not public companies.
Sure.
And we were on the Inc. 500 list 3 years in a row. In the top 100, only one other company has done that. So we basically had, from 1986 to 1997, we sold the company in 98. We had over 100% growth rates every year.
So you subbed out your manufacturing and put your resources into feet on the street, salespeople,
right.
and so forth, because that
To
was,
protect ourselves on.
right.
And the strategy by doing it that way is, if you've heard the 80-20 rule.
Sure. Pareto principle.
So if you're in a metro area, 20% of the accounts will do 80% of the business.
Right.
So if you allow your wholesaler go to those 20% of the accounts that do 80%, they have to sell everybody. By having our own salesperson only focused on the 20% and letting the wholesaler focus on the 80% that do 20% of the business,
right.
we can control our destiny better with the larger accounts. So that helped. I also started a chocolate company. I don't want to really get into the details of this, but just to show Barry that the lessons we learned from naming and packaging and go-to-market strategy, we applied directly to Cocoa Pete's Chocolate Adventures.
So basically you took a strategy and a mindset and essentially a formula of what works in the market as far as subbing out, feet on the street, having a vision, and all those other things, and just took it, almost a modular type of mindset to other products.
Exactly.
Okay.
Right. So now I want to talk about brands, and in the craft beer business, there are some really great, what I think are brands. One is called Dogfish Head. It's from Delaware. It's one of the fastest growing craft brewers now.
I'm embarrassed to say I have not seen it yet.
It's available in California, but what I love is their tagline. Not so much the label, but the tagline is off-centered ales for off-centered people. That tells you who they are, why they are, and what they're going to do. You know exactly what you're going to get when you see that. A company called Stone Brewing in San Diego County. They started, their first 2 years were a struggle. Then they came up with a beer they called Arrogant Bastard and put the whole branding behind Arrogant Bastard, basically you're not worthy kind of campaign. And that's a statement of who they are, why they are, and that really caught on. Fat Tire is part of New Belgium from Colorado. By focusing on Fat Tire for outdoor bicycling and targeting that initially, you can't be all things to all people.
Right.
But by targeting that in the beginning, that allowed them to get into market and then expand from there.
Pete, how important is it? I have to ask you this. Oh, go ahead.
But I just want to finish this.
Go ahead.
I have an example of a bad brand.
Right.
And this is a brand that came out in 1986. There we started. It was out in New York City. And the label shows the Brooklyn Bridge, and the title of it is New York Harbor Ale. Now, if you're in New York, you might be proud of the Brooklyn Bridge and you might want to buy it. But if you go 50 miles outside of New York City, back in the 80s, New York Harbor was polluted. So the image you have when you see the name New York Harbor Ale,
Sure.
when you're outside of New York City, isn't the Brooklyn Bridge. It's why would anybody want to drink beer made from polluted water? That brand did not succeed.
Sure. Actually, you know what? It's actually a perfect question or perfect follow-up, because what I was going to say is you can't be all things to all people.
Right. You got to target.
You have to target. Polarization is important. You know, kind of be better loved or hated than tolerated in a way, because people that love you are going to love you, and that you're going to grow viral.
You got to get a core constituency that'll do the work for you. You let them talk about it for you,
Sure.
but you got to hit
New
it.
York Harbor Ale does not say as much as, what was it? One before, Arrogant what?
Well, Arrogant Bastard.
Arrogant Bastard Ale and New York Harbor Ale.
Yep.
I like the Arrogant Bastard Ale, please. Go ahead. Sorry.
So now we get into, ultimately we want to talk about elevator pitches, and there's no one way of doing an elevator pitch, but I think the best way to indicate what has to be in an elevator pitch, it gets back to how do you develop a brand? And a friend of mine who has a brewery now, but he had a branding agency before, I told him I was working on a project for another brewery, and he said, well, we'll use this questionnaire, I use this. So what is this brand positioning questionnaire? If you're a company and you want to go to a branding agency for help on defining your brand, you can spin your wheels for days and weeks and months going back and forth. And the agency doesn't want to expend that kind of time because you're not getting paid for it. So the agencies will give you a questionnaire that you have to fill out that makes you think about what you want the brand to represent. Then they can refine it for you, but you have to do some initial thinking. Mm-hmm. So this is multiple pages of questions. And I'll just read the first page or two, but this is the same that you need in a elevator pitch.
Sure.
A mission statement. In no more than a few sentences, state your company's mission. You know, it makes you think. You can ramble on for 10 minutes about what you think the mission is, but to hone that down to a few sentences is hard.
Extremely hard.
Next is describe the competitive landscape. Is it crowded? Is it underdeveloped? Who specifically are the competitors? This makes you think, I'm not just going to make a product and it's going to be the greatest product on earth, but what market are you going into? Who's already there? What are the dynamics of the incumbents? Who else is planning on getting in or just getting in? The third is everything. Okay, you have a great product. I believe you. How is it differentiating from everybody else? How is your product differentiated in the marketplace? What makes it stand apart? What attributes offer enough incentive to motivate preference over a competitor? Mm-hmm. Unless you can describe what makes you different and why a customer would want you, forget it. You're just one of another. Even if you have the best product on earth,
right,
you have to be able to describe it. And this is the same if this is for a person. If you're going to go to an interview.
There's no doubt. I'm just thinking that exactly. It's actually when I talked to Alex when I walked in.
Right.
I mean, kind of.
So I'll just go through one more page on this questionnaire, and by the if you want a copy of the pitch, we can do that too. So the next question is, what is the brand personality? Describe it as if it was a person. Is it approachable or is it upbeat? Describe what you want, how you want people to react to your brand. What are the functional benefits of your products? Are there any? Never thought of that. Maybe there are 2 or 3 functional benefits.
Right.
What are the emotional benefits? How do your customers feel when thinking about or using your products? Think about arrogant bastard. People have an emotional attachment to that attitude.
Would you agree with this statement that I've heard often is people buy on emotion?
Yeah.
Right?
It's the first reaction.
It's the first reaction.
Right. So,
Sure, there's more, more product specific, age, sex, social of your target customer.
Right.
But I think that what you just covered is kind of tantamount. It's probably written in that order, because those are the keynotes.
right.
The age and sex and socioeconomic is probably not unimportant, but further down the list.
It's less critical. I'm not going to show Barry an example. This is the new beer that this guy who gave me his branding questionnaire. His new company is called Almanac Beer, and I use his example. He's executing on what he tells people to do, and it's a fabulous story. Almanac Beer, first the artwork is incredible. They've already won, it's only a year old and they've already won awards for the artwork. Their theme is, that's just another picture of the bottle. The theme is similar in restaurants of farm to table, where local chefs work with local farmers to highlight what's grown locally, what's fresh, bring it to the table.
Sure.
This company is working with local farmers where there's a local product in every one of their beers. And by the way, the name Almanac itself, it took me almost a year before I finally got it. I never thought about it. But when you think of Almanac, you think of Farmer's Almanac. So there's a hidden message in the name itself. There's a farm behind it. I thought, holy crap, that's brilliant. I'm slow, what can I say? But it took me a year to figure that out. So they show the farm.
Subliminally telling us this is farm related.
Right.
Yeah, cool.
They in all their support materials, they show the farmer, the farm, the produce. Their go-to-market strategy. Remember we talked about you have to focus and figure out who your core constituents.
Yeah.
So they're going to some obvious targets like craft beer stores that have everybody's beer.
Right.
But the key strategy is to go to all the famous chefs in the Bay Area, San Francisco, Oakland, all the people who are highlighting farm to table. They get it when they hear farm to bottle. They understand what it means. So they're in all the top high-end restaurants. You can't beat the PR of that. You can't. When the top chefs are saying, "I support Almanac Beer," you get third-party endorsements. It's a core constituency that lets you go from there. Brilliant go-to-market strategy.
We've all been in restaurants where we've eaten something and said, "Where would I get that?" Right, and so that's a great, core marketing strategy.
And they had no money, so they got guys like me to spend hours bottling for them. That's a picture of me hard at work.
I see it. I have to try it now. Where do you buy it? Is it in stores?
Yeah, I'm sure Ledger's has it over in the East Bay. So I'm working on a project. So just another example, what I wanted to show the brewers in South America, I'm working on an example with Half Moon Bay Brewing over in Half Moon Bay. They wanted to go beyond a brew pub and get their beer into distribution.
Sure.
So I told them, don't do it. There are over 2,000 microbreweries now. It's just too crowded.
Sure.
There's so much noise out there. How do you break through? So I told them, don't do it. That wasn't what they wanted to hear. So I said, if you really want to do it, you have to create a compelling brand and a compelling set of beers that support the brand strategy. So they asked me to create that. So Half Moon Bay Brewing, this is a beautiful picture of Pillar Point Harbor, and Mavericks, the surfing competition, is on the other side of the hill.
Right up the way there.
They actually own the trademark for Mavericks in the world of beer. So we talked about, do we highlight Mavericks? Do we highlight Half Moon Bay? And my 2 cents was, if you want to be national, and they'd love to get to national. My thinking was Mavericks from the serving competition, but also Maverick as a word and an attitude.
Sure.
There's more to play with Maverick than Half Moon Bay. We won't throw Half Moon Bay away because it's a great location and you want a home.
Right.
But Maverick can maybe be the way to go. This is a picture of the waves at Mavericks. So I showed you before the brand questionnaire
Right.
from my friend who did the Almanac beer. Right. So I just wanted to show an example to the South American brewers. I filled out this questionnaire for Half Moon Bay Brewing to see if they would agree that did they like the direction of the brand strategy? Was it meaningful to them and then hopefully to outside customers? So this is what we agreed to for our brand strategy, and then we worked with an agency to kind of fill it out.
I just want to make note real quickly that all these questionnaires start with mission. And I want to stress to any of us who are starting to do anything,
right,
to have a mission,
right,
starting first, because without that, you're going to be going in a number of different directions. That's not coincidental that all of your brand statements start with a mission as a P. It's not a coincidence. That's where you need to start.
Well, just so you know, because this craft beer market was so saturated, I said, let's go left when everybody else is going right.
Sure.
So nowadays, most craft brewers are going higher alcohol, beers aged in wood, beers that are sour, beers that are really intense, and beers that you can sip and enjoy. But I said, let's take a different approach. Since you own the trademark for Mavericks, we don't want a surfer's beer, but maybe our mission is to be a beer supplier to outdoor enthusiasts. Mm-hmm. Yes, you can be a surfer, swimmer, runner, biker, but you like the outdoors. We put the beer in cans for mobility for outdoor enthusiasts. Mm. But the most important thing is we go the opposite direction in alcohol. We make a full flavored beer so people enjoy the flavor, but all the beers have to be under 4%, which is actually under the alcohol percentage of light beer. So the whole differentiation is outdoor orientation in cans and beers that you can keep drinking and not get in the way of your outdoor activities. Your body will process the alcohol and these low alcohol beers as quickly as you're drinking it. So you can continue outdoor activities. Will this succeed? Who knows? Right. But it's a way to break through the noise. If you want to get a wholesaler to carry you when they're carrying 500 beers now, why would they take you? Well, this is a whole different strategy.
Sure.
So
less than light beer.
Less than light beer, but more. We're going for flavor.
Got that. The alcohol is less than light beer.
Yeah. Yeah. And we don't care about calories because you're an outdoor enthusiast. Who cares? So the next section, put a competitive landscape in. Talked about the differentiation, the brand personality, the functional benefits, emotional benefits, target consumer, product exposure, yada, yada, yada. So we defined everything around this core brand strategy. So now we are using an agency to really fill this out. But now when we showed this to the agencies, most agencies, when I dialed them up and said, I'm working on a beer project, they know the craft beer business is crowded. Sure. Their initial reaction was no. Right. After seeing this write-up, they got it. They said not only, everybody said we wanted to bid on this project because they understood this is a complete differentiated way of going about the business.
So you think they bought in because of the differentiation as opposed to the commoditization piece? Because otherwise you're just a commodity, you're one of a gazillion.
Right, right. Ta-da!
Thank you, that's awesome. So, I mean, the main takeaways really for you, I mean, I don't want to say if you had to do it over again, because you actually are doing it over again a little bit. You have a chocolate company, right, and so forth. So, to sum up
is, and whenever I talk to young entrepreneurs,
sure,
my first question is your product great?
Right.
If the answer is no, then I said, don't do it.
Right.
If the answer is yes, then I say, great, well, let's not ever talk about it again.
Okay.
Now let's talk about these other things that are more important than just having a great product.
And those would be, just to sum up, the other things that are more important.
What the mission of your company is, and clearly what your differentiation is. Why would anybody care about you? Your go-to-market strategy, well, you have to know the competitive landscape. That's a given, just to know where you fit in, but then what your differentiation is and how you attack the market in a way that you get through the noise.
Sure. So it's interesting for me because I didn't know this, and we've known each other a long time. I didn't know that you didn't set out to have a beer company. You set out to start a business, and beer was almost a byproduct of your vision to want to be in business.
Yeah, and like I said, it's better to be lucky than smart.
Fair enough. But you really did make your own luck. I mean, you sat down, you thought it through. You didn't throw money in places where it was not leverageable. You couldn't afford an ad agency
Right.
first, so you did things on your own. Before we had the camera on, you told me the story about how Wicked
Right.
developed, and actually, you know, maybe it's a nice point to end this because I do think differentiation is really critical, and I talk about this all the time with respect to, you know, your job search, your career development. You know, you could be one of many, or you could stand out. And you know, the 80-20 rule that you discussed is something called the Pareto principle, which I'll talk about more in another area. But it's a really important thing. 80% of the wealth is 20% of the people, because those 20% have, you know, there's a way to differentiate.
Right.
You know, average is average, right? You know, commodity is commodity, but Wicked, you think, was kind of a defining piece of
Sure.
of all this. So
Wicked was a real. Wicked wasn't a gold; it was a platinum.
Okay.
We were personalizing it, and Mark didn't drink, so it was Pete's Brewing Company. Mark knew nothing about beer, so he allowed me to make the beer. And my comment to him was, "I don't know if we're going to be successful, so I want to brew a beer that I can drink at home in case we have a lot of inventory left over if we fail." So I copied an English beer that I really liked. It was my favorite beer at the time. I tried copying it. 4 experiments, 4 failures, but the 4th failure was even better than the beer I had in mind. So I said, screw copying this English beer. This 4th failure is even better.
So the 4th failure was actually a better beer than the one you set out to make.
Right.
So, quote unquote failure.
Yeah. So it was a brown ale. So obviously, what would have been typical at the time would have been to call it Pete's Ale or Pete's Brown Ale.
Right.
And we thought, nobody's going to care. Let's come up with an adjective that'll be a hook. It'll make people do a double take, maybe smile. But the key thing is they have to stop and be able and look twice at it. So we did the old MBA whiteboard thing and started putting up adjectives, and nothing worked. But there was a comedian who had a drive time radio show, Alex Bennett, and he would bring on comedians who were visiting San Francisco doing bits to get people to come to the evening gigs. And Bob the Bobcat Galthwaite, I didn't know he was from New England, but he yelled and screamed in his bits, "Wicked this, wicked that." It turns out in Massachusetts and Maine, wicked is one of the ultimate descriptors. Wicked meaning the opposite of bad, meaning the best.
Of course.
So when we heard wicked,
Somebody has a wicked curveball. That's
right.
a good thing. Right?
So when we heard wicked, we said, that's it. So we put it in, and over time, whenever I asked people why would they try, for the first time, why would they try Pete's Wicked Ale, and 99 out of 100 said with the name Wicked, they had to try it. So again, you have to have people stop and look at your product first, and then the hook will have them pick it up, and then maybe they'll buy it.
Sure. Thank you so much. That was totally awesome. Pete's Wicked Ale. Thank you. Thanks, Pete.
Okay.
Pleasure.